So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs or important news items in that day's current affairs in a very short span of time within 20 minutes. Now, the purpose of this lecture series is quite simple. We want you to cover your current affairs on a daily basis. And why? Well, for a very simple reason that current affairs are very important part of your syllabus. If you're serious about UPSC examination or any other state civil services examination, well, you cannot clear that exam without covering current affairs. So we want you to cover your current affairs on a daily basis. But the issue is that you are civil services aspirants. And as civil services aspirants, your time is of the essence. Your time is very important. So you can't spend the entire day on current affairs because you have to cover other subjects as well. So therefore, for your to facilitate your preparation for your convenience, what I do is on a daily basis, I choose important topics from the newspaper, all the newspapers. The important topics are chosen on the basis of their probability in featuring in civil services examination. So I do the hard work for you. I choose those important topics which you have to focus on. I ignore all the other topics which are not important from the perspective of civil services examination. And then we cover those topics within 20 minutes. Okay. Now, covering current affairs on a daily basis should be a daily habit of yours. You should do that. Therefore, make this lecture series a part of your daily routine. All right. Make it a daily habit of yours. Now, today we are going to be covering September 25, 2024's current affairs. And the important topics that would feature in today's lecture are as following. So, these are the four topics that we would focus on. Topic number one is there was this article in Indian Express which talked about the importance of Shukrayaan. Why is ISRO sending a Venus mission? Okay, the reason why Venus mission is important for ISRO. So, we'll talk about this. Then there was very interesting hypothesis that was discussed in the newspaper called Kurgan Hypothesis. Now, this Kurgan Hypothesis is very important from the perspective of understanding history. Now, what is this hypothesis? How does it explain global events or global historical events? We'll talk about it. It's a very important hypothesis. Chances are that it would feature in your examination. So, pay close attention on this topic as well. Okay. Then recently, a government notification came out or government clarification came out regarding the use of sustainable aviation fuel. Okay, so what is the sustainable aviation fuel? As the name suggests, it would be used in the aviation industry, aircrafts. So how would it be used? We'll talk about this. Okay, and in the end, we'll talk about a global issue. There is a country in the Pacific Ocean, an island nation called Tuvalu, and Tuvalu is sinking because of the rise in global sea levels. Okay, this island nation is sinking, and because of that, its maritime boundaries are also shrinking. So, to save its maritime boundaries, Tuvalu has asked to amend the laws related to maritime boundaries or international laws related to the designation of maritime boundaries. Okay, so we'll talk about the issue of Tuvalu's maritime boundaries. All right, makes sense? So, we'll focus on these four issues. Let's deal with them one by one. Let's start with why is Shukrayaan important? Okay, so the Union Cabinet last week approved India's first mission to Venus that ISRO aims to launch in March 2028. Okay, now this is going to be India's second interplanetary mission because India's first interplanetary mission was Mangalyaan. Okay, Mars orbiter mission, and it was launched in 2013. So now that ISRO is going to launch a Venus mission, this would be second planetary mission, but it would be ISRO's first Venus mission. Now, why does ISRO want to study Venus? Why do space agencies all over the world want to study Venus? Well, Venus has certain special features. First of all, Venus is often referred to as Earth's twin. Why? Because it is similar in mass, density, and size to Earth. Therefore, studying Venus may offer scientists clues about the evolution of Earth. It will reveal certain facts about the Earth. Studying Venus would help us understand Earth because Venus is like Earth in many aspects. Notably, Venus is thought to have had water at some point in its history, but has now become a dry, dusty planet. Now, how did it become a dry, dusty planet? It is very important for us to study that because we would also know that what is in store, what is in the future for Earth. Okay, maybe someday Earth might also become a dry, dusty planet. You never know. So you need to study Venus. Okay, now Venus is similar to Earth, and that is why it is called Earth's twin. That's okay. It is similar in mass, density, and size. But it is also different from Earth in many ways. It is a unique planet. Okay, so what is Venus's uniqueness? First of all, Venus is the hottest planet. Okay, though Mercury is closest to the Sun. Okay, on second number is Venus. As far as closeness to Earth is concerned, Mercury is closest to the Sun, and Venus is second most close. But Venus is the hottest planet in the solar system. It has an extremely high surface temperature of around 462 degrees Celsius. Scientists believe this is due to greenhouse effect. Now, you know what is greenhouse effect? Maybe Venus's atmosphere has a lot of carbon dioxide and water vapor. Okay? And these gases are known to create greenhouse effect, because of which Venus is very hot. Hotter than even Mercury, because Mercury has no atmosphere. And because of that, Mercury is not as hot as Venus, because Venus has an atmosphere, and Venus's atmosphere is actually increasing its temperature. So it is the hottest planet. Then Venus has a very thick atmosphere. Venusian atmosphere is 93 times thicker than Earth. And that is why atmospheric pressure on Venus is very high. It is as high as pressure at the bottom of Earth's oceans. As high as that. So the kind of pressure the bottom of our oceans feel, that is similar to the pressure that anyone would feel on the surface of Venus, because its atmosphere is very thick. Plus, its atmosphere contains 96.5% of carbon dioxide. So 96.5% of Venus's atmosphere is made up of carbon dioxide, and because of that, there is this greenhouse effect, and because of that, temperatures are quite high. The other unique feature about Venus is that it rotates very slowly. Earth takes 24 hours, approximately 24 hours to complete one rotation around its axis. Venus takes 243 Earth days to complete one rotation around its axis. So it rotates very slowly. Okay. Now, as you can see in this picture, this thing called Da Vinci. Da Vinci is actually an American mission to Venus. We'll talk about it. But first, let's talk about certain important facts or certain other important facts regarding Shukrayaan mission of ISRO. So with Earth and Venus coming close to each other, offering the shortest path for mission, every 19 months it happens that Earth and Venus come close to each other. And it is at that time only that a journey can be made between Earth and Venus. A spacecraft can be launched between Earth and Venus. Therefore, space agencies have a very challenging task of launching a spacecraft to Venus, because this window of opportunity when you can launch a spacecraft from the Earth comes every 19 months. Okay. Now, Shukrayaan will carry scientific payloads weighing around 100 kg. Once Shukrayaan is out of Earth's orbit, it will take around 140 days to reach Venus. The spacecraft would be placed in a highly elliptical orbit around Venus. This highly elliptical orbit would be like, this is Venus. The spacecraft would revolve around Venus like this. Shukrayaan would revolve around Venus like this. The closest point would be 500 kilometers and the farthest point would be 60,000 kilometers. So it would revolve around Venus in a highly elliptical orbit. Okay, that's all that has been revealed by ISRO so far. More details regarding Shukrayaan would be revealed by ISRO in future. Okay, now there are a few other missions that are in the pipeline with respect to Venus. Okay, various international missions that are set to be launched to Venus are famous ones. We'll talk about famous one. NASA is going to launch Da Vinci in 2029 and Veritas in 2031. This is the photo of Da Vinci. Okay, deep atmosphere Venus investigation of noble gases, chemistry and imaging. Then there is Veritas, that is again by NASA. Then European Space Agency would launch Envision mission in 2030. So these are the other international missions that you should know about, which would study the planet Venus. All right, that's all you need to know about Shukrayaan. Now let's move on to our second interesting topic of the day, which is known as Kurgan Hypothesis. Okay, now let's read what's in the news first, and then I'll explain the entire hypothesis to you. Okay, look, a team of researchers has found that although horseback riding leaves subtle marks in human skeletons, those changes cannot confirm whether people have ridden horses during their lives. Okay, these findings cast a doubt on long-held theory in the field of archaeology called Kurgan Hypothesis. So recently, a study has been conducted which actually refutes Kurgan Hypothesis. Kurgan Hypothesis has long been an accepted theory, as far as human evolution is concerned or archaeology is concerned. Okay. Now, this recent research actually casts some doubts on Kurgan hypothesis. Now, the question is, what is Kurgan hypothesis? So, look, it is said that human beings first domesticated horses in 35,000 BC, 3500 BC. Before that, humans didn't know about horses or they didn't ride horses. In and around 3500 BC, humans started to domesticate horses. And they were first domesticated by people around Black Sea. So there were ancient humans which were living around Black Sea during this time who first domesticated horses, right? These people are referred to as Yamanya. Okay, so these were basically Central Asian people who lived around Black Sea and they first domesticated horses. It is said that these people, because they were able to domesticate horses, they were able to travel to far off places. Okay, and these people travel to far off places on a horseback, right? These people travel to Europe. These people travel to Indian subcontinent, other parts of Asia, Iran, and many areas. Okay, on a horseback. Because before domesticating horses, human beings weren't able to travel that far. But because of these new vehicles that human beings discovered, they were able to travel to far off places. And these Yamanya people actually, along with them, brought new languages to these places. These Yamanya people actually spoke a particular language, which these people actually spread to various parts of the world like Europe and India. And because of these languages, it is said that Hindi, Indian languages like Hindi, Punjabi, Gujarati, Sanskrit, and European languages like English, German, French, Latin, these languages are quite similar. Indian languages and European languages are quite similar. It is said that these languages originated from one root language, okay, and they evolved differently in different regions, but they came from one single language, okay. That is why these languages are known as Indo-European family of languages, because they are quite similar. Now, it is said that Indo-European family of languages were spread by these Yamanya people, because these Yamanya people actually spoke a particular language, and then they spread to different parts of the world, and that is why these different parts of the world speak a language that had its origins in Yamanya language, and that is why these languages are similar and called Indo-European family of languages. Okay. Now, this was what was said by Kurgan hypothesis. Now, how did archaeologists provided a proof for this hypothesis? You know, they found skeletons of people who lived around Black Sea during this time, during 3000 BC, and they studied those skeletons, and they found that these human skeletons had different, they were a little different from other skeletons. And why they were different? Because these people used to travel on a horseback for longer periods of time. And if you travel on a horseback for longer periods of time, your skeleton changes a little. And these people had those changes. That is why it is said that these were the first people who discovered or domesticated horses and traveled to different parts of the world. Okay? This is what Kurgan hypothesis is. This hypothesis emerged in 20th century and proposed that domestication of horse began in 35,000 BC by ancient humans called Yamanya who lived near Black Sea. They used horses to travel across Eurasia and by doing so spread primordial versions of Indian Indo-European languages. In fact, a 2023 scientific study actually proved Kurgan hypothesis. They studied human skeletons belonging to ancient Yamanya people, and these skeletons had wear and tear in their skeleton due to horseback riding. Thus, they confirmed Kurgan hypothesis. But the latest 2024 study, it found that these changes in human skeleton is not just because of riding on a horseback. It can be made, these changes can be made if you're sitting for longer periods of time, if you're traveling in a cart and all that. So this new study actually doubts Kurgan hypothesis, but archaeologists still believe that Kurgan hypothesis is a well-accepted theory. Now, what is important for you is, you should know what Kurgan hypothesis is. Okay, and it's a very interesting hypothesis. We realize who our ancestors were, or linguistically speaking, who were our ancestors. Okay, all right. Now let's talk about our third news topic, which is sustainable aviation fuel. Now, what is this? First of all, let's take a look at what was in the news. So, the government is likely to come up with mandates for blending sustainable aviation fuel with aviation turbine fuel for domestic flights only after global mandates for international flights kick in from 2027. Now, what does that mean? Look, aeroplanes use a particular form of fuel called aviation turbine fuel. Like petrol and diesel, aviation turbine fuel also comes from crude oil. Okay, so this aviation turbine fuel is used in flights. Now, this aviation turbine fuel actually releases a lot of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and it causes a lot of pollution also. Now, scientists have found an alternative to aviation turbine fuel. It is known as sustainable aviation fuel. Now, this sustainable aviation fuel is made up of vegetable oil. Okay, and it is not that polluting. It does not release that much amount of greenhouse gases. And it is quite similar to aviation turbine fuel. That is why many people are saying that from now on, these flights should carry a particular form of fuel, which is a mixture of ATF and SAF. By blending ATF with SAF, you will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases emitted. Okay, and that is why globally it is argued, and globally, International Civil Aviation Organization has said that after 2027, all international flights should use a blended form of ATF and SAF because SAF is a cleaner form of fuel. So use a blended version. Now, many people in India were also arguing that, look, International Civil Aviation Organization has said that this blended form of fuel should be used in international flights. But for domestic flights, Indian government should also come out with a notification, with a mandate. And therefore, many people were asking Government of India to come out with a mandate or make it mandatory for domestic flights also to use this combination, use this blended combination. Okay, but Government of India has clearly said that we won't mandate any domestic flight companies or domestic aeroplane companies or domestic flights to use blended form of fuel. Government has said that we won't ask any flights, domestic flights, to use this form of fuel until 2027. 2027 is the year when international flights will use this. Government has said that only after the usage of these fuels in international flights, we will make it mandatory to be used in domestic flights. Only after its use in international flights. This is what this news is all about. Okay, though already government has been working on a roadmap for introduction of sustainable aviation fuel in domestic flights, but government has said that it would be difficult for aeroplane companies to adapt to these changes. Therefore, we will ask them to adapt to these changes only after 2027. Now, questions might be asked from what is SAF? So we'll talk about sustainable aviation fuel. So basically, SAF is a biofuel that is produced from sustainable feedstock and has similar chemistry to conventional aviation turbine fuel. Now, ATF is derived from crude oil. SAF is a biofuel. Okay. Now, existing aircraft engines can easily use SAF and ATF blend. Why? Because SAF is quite similar to ATF. In fact, Airbus, a very famous global aircraft manufacturing company, it has said that our engines can even take 50% blend of SAF and ATF. Right? So that is why aircraft companies should straight away start with blended fuel. But the reason why Government of India is waiting till 2027 and other countries are also waiting till 2027 is because SAF is extremely expensive. It requires high technology and high production costs. They are waiting till 2027 because they want to wait for an improvement in technology which would reduce the cost and technology levels of SAF so that producing SAF becomes cheaper. Okay. Now, I recently, like a few minutes back, I mentioned that internationally it has become mandatory to use blended fuel after 2027. Now, what is this international mandate? Okay. The year 2027 will be an important one for adoption of SAF globally with mandatory phase of International Civil Aviation Organization's Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, CORSIA. So ICAO actually have come out with an agreement called CORSIA, which would make it mandatory for international flights to use blended SAF fuel after 2027. Okay, and would also have to do that for its international flights. As far as domestic flights are concerned, the decision is up to Government of India. Okay, but all of this is being done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All right. And now let's move on to our last news item of the day, which is Tuvalu's maritime boundary. Okay. Now, as you can see, Tuvalu is basically a small island nation in the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Australia. It is a very small nation. It has a population of 11,000. Its elevation level is also just 2 meters above sea level. And as you can see, that global warming has become a reality now. And because of global warming, global sea levels are rising. NASA scientists say that because Tuvalu is just 2 meters above sea level, by 2050, 60% of Tuvalu's residents and half of Tuvalu's territory would get submerged underwater because sea levels are rising. Now, if half of Tuvalu's territory gets submerged underwater, its maritime boundaries would shrink. Okay? And Tuvalu is worried about that. That is why Tuvalu is actually asking for an amendment to the International Law of Sea so that there is a provision for Tuvalu to protect its maritime boundaries. They do not get shrink or they do not shrink. Okay. Now, this is what was in the news. Now, we'll talk about Tuvalu. So, what is Tuvalu? Basically, it was formerly known as Ellice Islands because at one point of time they were under the control of British. It is a small island country in Polynesian region of Oceania, Pacific Ocean. It is midway between Hawaii and Australia. It is an independent island nation within the British Commonwealth with 9 islands. Its capital is Funafati and its population is around 11,000. Now, Tuvalu is actually calling for an amendment to international law, which decides maritime boundaries. Now, what is this international law? Which law are they talking about? Well, they are talking about UN clause. United Nations Convention on Laws of Sea 1982. Okay, it is an international agreement that establishes the legal framework for marine and maritime activities. It is the only international law convention which stipulates a framework for state jurisdiction in maritime spaces. State jurisdiction means that how much of the sea or ocean waters come under the jurisdiction of a particular country. Okay, it basically divides the seas into 5 parts: internal waters, which are under the control of a particular country; territorial waters, again under the control of particular country; contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, and high seas. High seas is that area of the ocean which is under the control of no country. Okay, this is their framework that they talked about. Like there is land. Okay, as you can see, this is land. Let's suppose of India. Now there is a high tide line and a low tide line. Till low tide line are known as internal waters. Then from low tide line till 12 nautical miles into the ocean, there is territorial waters. Then from low tide line till 200 nautical miles, there is exclusive economic zone. From territorial waters till 12 nautical miles, it is contiguous zone. And after 200 nautical miles, there are high seas. High seas are under the control of no country. Okay? This is what is decided in UN clause. Okay? Now, Tuvalu is saying that if most of its land gets submerged, then their territorial waters or territorial sea would also shrink. Their maritime boundaries would shrink. You can see if land moves leftwards, then these borders would also move leftwards, and this would shrink the territorial waters of Tuvalu, and that is why Tuvalu is asking for an amendment to UN clause. Make sense? That's about it. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I hope it has added value to your preparation. If you want to download the entire PDF file for this lecture, which contains the detailed notes of whatever was discussed in this lecture, you can download that PDF file from our Telegram channel. So make sure you click on the link provided in the comment section. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. Click on that link, go to our Telegram channel, follow it, and download the PDF of not just this lecture, but any other lecture that has featured on our YouTube channel. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone.